Sable Voss had never considered herself the kind of woman who listened at doors. But the door to the king's solar was cracked open, and the voice that slithered through it belonged to a woman who had no business being in there at this hour, or any hour. "You cannot be serious?" the woman said, her tone dripping with amusement. "That little smudge on her collarbone? That is what the realm is supposed to accept as a Luna mark?" Laughter, low and rich and devastating. And then Kale's voice. Her mate, her husband, the Alpha King of Veilcross. The man who had pressed his mouth to that very mark on their bonding night and whispered, "Mine." "It is rather unfortunate," Kale said. There was no hesitation in his voice, no discomfort. Just casual, careless agreement. "The seer assured me the bond was legitimate. But honestly, Meridia, the mark itself looks like a bruise that never healed." More laughter. The woman, Meridia, made a sound of theatrical sympathy. "Poor thing. She probably stares at it in the mirror every morning, willing it to glow." "It does not glow," Kale confirmed, and there was something worse than cruelty in his voice. There was boredom. "It has never glowed. Not once." Sable's hand was on the wall. She could not remember putting it there. Her fingertips pressed against the cold stone, and her lungs had stopped working. The Luna mark on her collarbone burned like a fresh wound, which was impossible because it had never burned. It had never done anything. It sat on her skin like a stain, dull and colorless. And she had spent years pretending that did not matter. 3 years of watching other Luna marks shine like captured moonlight on the throats and wrists of bonded women across the realm. 3 years of telling herself that the bond was real, that the mark's appearance meant nothing, that Kale chose her regardless. 3 years of lying. "The council is already talking," Meridia continued, her voice dropping to something conspiratorial. "They say the mark is defective. They say perhaps the bond was never real at all, that the seer was mistaken. And if the bond was never real..." She let the sentence hang. "Then the Luna title can be challenged," Kale finished. Silence, heavy and deliberate. "Would you challenge it?" he asked. Softer now. Closer. The sound of a man leaning toward a woman who was not his wife. "Would you let me?" Meridia whispered back. Sable did not hear the answer. She did not need to. Her body moved before her mind caught up. Down the corridor, past the guards who straightened as she passed, through the eastern gallery where moonlight spilled across the marble floor. She did not run. Running would mean she was fleeing, and she was not fleeing. She was walking with perfect composure through the palace that had been her prison since the bonding, while her chest caved in, and her wolf howled inside her skull. She reached her chambers and shut the door without a sound. She stood in the dark. She pressed both hands flat against the mark and breathed. In, out, in. The mark did not glow. It never had. She thought about her mother's Luna mark, a radiant silver crescent that pulsed with light whenever her father entered the room. She thought about the way bonded wolves described the sensation: warmth, completeness, a second heartbeat layered beneath their own. Sable had never felt any of that. She had felt duty, obligation, the weight of a crown she had never asked for, and the suffocating pressure of performing a role the realm had decided she was failing at. And now she knew why. Sable opened her wardrobe. She pulled out a traveling cloak, leather boots worn soft from years of use, and a satchel she had packed 6 months ago and never unpacked. She had told herself the satchel was precautionary, a comfort, something to hold on to when the loneliness got bad enough to taste. She had always known this night would come. She left a single note on the pillow. 4 words. "Do not follow me." The palace gates were unguarded at the 3rd bell. She had memorized the rotation months ago. Sable Voss, Luna of Veilcross, wife to the Alpha King, walked out of her own kingdom in the dead of night with nothing but a satchel, a cloak, and the dull, colorless mark of a bond that had never been real. She did not look back. By dawn, she had crossed the Ashenmere River. By midday, she had reached the border. And by sunset, she stood at the gates of a kingdom no wolf had entered in over 100 years. The kingdom of Thursol, domain of the dragon-blooded lord, Severin Cale. The guards at the gate were not wolves. They were something else entirely. Tall and sharp-featured, with pupils that caught the fading light in vertical slits. They looked at her with open suspicion. "State your name and purpose," the taller one said. Sable straightened her spine. "My name is Sable Voss. I am requesting asylum." "From what?" Sable met his gaze and did not flinch. "From my mate." The guards exchanged a glance. The taller one disappeared through the gate. The remaining guard studied her in silence, his hand resting on the hilt of a blade that shimmered with an opalescent sheen. The gate opened. A woman stepped through, dressed in deep burgundy armor that fit her like a second skin. Her hair was cropped short, her jaw sharp, her eyes carrying the same slitted gaze as the guards. "I am Commander Thessaly Varn," she said. "You are requesting asylum in the domain of Lord Severin Cale." "Yes." "From your mate?" "Yes." Thessaly studied her for a long moment. "The dragon-blooded lord does not involve himself in wolf disputes." "This is not a dispute," Sable said. "This is a woman asking for a place to stand." Something shifted in the commander's expression, not softness, recognition. She stepped aside and gestured through the gate. "Then stand," she said. Sable walked through. Behind her, the gates of Thursol closed with a sound like a held breath finally released, and somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the dull mark, something flickered. Just once. So faint she almost missed it. 3 years earlier, Sable Voss had been nobody. Not nobody in the dramatic sense, the kind of nobody who turned out to be a hidden princess or a prophecy child. Nobody in the real sense. She was the third daughter of a minor pack healer in the Grey Mist territories, a region so remote that royal couriers regularly got lost trying to deliver census documents. Her mother had a beautiful Luna mark. Her father adored her mother. Her 2 older sisters had both bonded to dependable wolves from neighboring packs, and their marks had bloomed bright the moment the bonds locked into place. Sable's mark had appeared on her 18th birthday, just like tradition dictated. But instead of the luminous silver crescent her mother bore, or the golden starburst her eldest sister wore at her throat, Sable's mark was a pale, grayish thing on her collarbone. It looked less like a blessing, and more like a thumbprint left in ash. Her mother had held her face in both hands and said, "It will brighten when you meet your mate, darling. Some marks just take longer." Sable had believed her through the matching ceremony, through the seer's pronouncement that her bond was destined for the Alpha King himself, through the stunned silence that followed because no one from Grey Mist had ever been matched to royalty. She had believed her through the bonding night when Cale had taken her hand and spoken the ancient vows and pressed his lips to the mark on her collarbone. "Mine," he had whispered. And her wolf had stirred, just barely, like something trying to wake from a drugged sleep. She had waited for the mark to brighten. It never did. The first year was loneliness dressed in silk. Sable learned the rhythms of the palace, the elaborate meals she ate alone because Cale dined with his advisors, the social functions where noble women smiled with their mouths but not their eyes, the way servants looked at her mark when they thought she was not paying attention. A Luna without a glowing mark was a Luna under suspicion. She heard the whispers in hallways that went silent when she turned the corner. She saw the sidelong glances at formal dinners, the way noble women's gazes drifted to her collarbone and then away, their smiles tightening with something that was not quite pity and not quite contempt. She kept busy. She threw herself into the healing work she had trained for, setting up an herb garden in the palace's neglected eastern courtyard and offering remedies to the kitchen staff and stable hands who could not afford the court physician. It was the only place she felt useful, the only place where people looked at her hands instead of her mark. She studied the old texts in the palace library during the long evenings when Kale was elsewhere, learning about bond magic, about marks, about rare cases where a bond took years to manifest. She told herself she was one of those rare cases. She told herself so many times it almost became true. The second year was isolation hardened into routine. Kale was courteous but distant, a man performing the role of husband with the same efficient detachment he brought to treaty negotiations. He visited her chambers on occasion, duty visits that left her feeling hollow and scraped clean afterward. He never mentioned the mark. He never asked how she was settling in, never inquired about her garden or her work. He introduced her at court functions as the Luna, rather than by name, and Sable learned to stand beside him with her chin raised and her hands still, and her heart locked behind her ribs where no one could see it breaking. She made one friend, Nolara, a wolf from the southern coast who served as Kale's correspondence secretary. Nolara was blunt, warm, and entirely unimpressed by rank, which made her the only person who spoke to Sable like a human being rather than a curiosity. "The court thinks you are meek," Nolara told her one afternoon. "They mistake your quiet for weakness." "Maybe it is weakness," Sable said. Nolara snorted. "Weakness does not survive 2 years in a palace that wants it gone. That is endurance." The third year was when Meridia arrived. Lady Meridia Selene, daughter of the Embervale Alpha, a political ally Kale could not afford to offend. She swept into court like a storm front, all dark hair and sharp cheekbones, and a Luna mark on her wrist that blazed so bright it left afterimages. She was unbonded, and she looked at Kale the way a predator looks at a meal it has already decided to take. Sable watched it happen. The private audiences, the hunting trips, the way Meridia touched Kale's arm when she laughed, casual and possessive, and the way he did not pull away, the way Meridia smiled at her with courtesy that never reached her eyes. Nolara saw it too. "You need to fight back. Claim your position." "He does see me," Sable replied. "That is the problem. He sees me and sees nothing worth holding on to." And then she heard them laughing. And everything she had endured collapsed into a single clarifying truth. She was done. There was one thing she took that was not hers. Before she left, Sable stopped at the Royal Library and pulled a single book from the restricted shelf. A leather-bound volume with no title on its spine, old enough that the pages crackled when she opened it. She had found it weeks ago during one of her late-night research sessions. The book was not about Luna marks. It was about dragon blood. And what she had read in its pages was the reason she knew exactly where to run. Thyrsil was nothing like Velcross. Velcross was stone and tradition and the smell of pine forests pressing against ancient walls. Thyrsil was heat. The air carried a warmth that had nothing to do with the season, a dry, mineral warmth that rose from the ground itself. The architecture was all sharp angles and dark glass, towers that caught the light and threw it back in fractured rainbows. Commander Thessaly walked 3 paces ahead, setting a brisk pace through the lower district without looking back. Sable kept up. She was exhausted and starving, and her boots had worn a blister into her left heel, but she kept up because she understood instinctively that this was a test. "You will be housed in the Eastern Quarter," Thessaly said. "Provisional residency. You are not a citizen. You are not a guest. You are a petitioner, until the Lord decides otherwise." "When will I see him?" Sable asked. "When he decides to see you." The provisional quarters were a single room above a blacksmith's forge. The heat rose through the floorboards in waves. The bed was narrow. The window looked out onto a courtyard where 2 figures sparred with weapons she had never seen. long staffs tipped with curved blades that sang when they cut the air. She sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hands to her face. She had left her kingdom, her title, her mate. She had walked into a land where wolves were not welcome, where the ruling lord was something older and stranger and more dangerous than anything she had been raised to understand. Sleep came in fragments. She dreamed of Kale's laughter, of Meridia's voice sliding through a cracked door, of the gray mark pulsing with a light that vanished the moment she tried to look at it. She woke in the dark to hammering from the forge below and lay staring at the ceiling until dawn. Dawn in Thyrsil came up copper instead of gold. The blacksmith, a broad woman with burn-scarred forearms and slitted eyes, glanced at Sable without interest. "There is bread on the counter. Do not touch my tools." Sable ate standing up. The bread was dense and dark and tasted faintly of honey and something smoky she could not identify. Her wolf was restless, pressed against her ribs, unsettled by the foreignness of everything. A knock at the door. Thessaly stood in the courtyard, her face neutral. "The Lord will see you," she said. Sable's pulse spiked so hard she felt it in her teeth. Now! Now! The citadel was carved from dark iridescent stone that rose in sweeping curves and sharp spires, designed to channel the wind. The sound it made was almost musical, a resonant hum Sable felt in her bones. Thessaly led her through doors 3 times her height and into a hall that stole her breath. The ceiling was a dome of dark glass that filtered sunlight into shifting patterns of amber and deep red, moving across the floor like living things. And at the far end, seated behind a desk that looked absurdly ordinary compared to the grandeur surrounding it, was Severin Kale. He was not what she expected. She had expected a monster. The wolf kingdoms told stories about the dragon-blooded like parents, told stories about creatures under the bed. She had imagined someone monstrous, wreathed in smoke and menace. Severin Kale looked like a man, tall, lean, with sharp features and dark hair that fell just past his jaw. He wore a simple dark coat. No crown, no ornamentation. Nothing that announced his rank except the way the room seemed to orient around him. He was writing when she entered and did not look up. 1 minute passed. 2. He set down his pen, looked up. His eyes were dark amber, shot through with filaments of deep gold that moved, actually moved, like embers stirred by breath. They locked onto hers, and Sable felt something she had never felt from Kale in all her years of marriage. She felt seen. "Sable Voss," Severin said. His voice was quiet, carrying authority that did not need volume. "Luna of Veilcross, mate to Alpha King Kale Davrin." "Former," Sable corrected before she could stop herself. "Former Luna." One dark eyebrow rose. "The bond has been formally dissolved?" "No." "Then you are still Luna." "I am whatever I decide to be." The silence that followed was the most terrifying 3 seconds of her life. She had just contradicted the lord of a foreign kingdom in his own hall on her first day. Then the corner of Severin's mouth shifted. Not a smile. Something smaller and far more dangerous. "Sit," he said. She sat. Her knees were shaking. "You are requesting asylum from your bonded mate, an Alpha King." He said it like reading from a dry legal document. Granting such a request would constitute a political act. Your mate would interpret it as a provocation. "Yes." "And you came anyway?" "Yes." Those amber eyes studied her, and Sable had the unnerving sensation that he was looking at something layered over her, something she could not see. The embersite, she realized. He was looking at her bond. "Your mark," Severin said. "Show me." Sable pulled the fabric aside, exposing the dull gray smudge on her collarbone. She braced for disgust, pity, or dismissive amusement. Severin leaned forward. The gold filaments in his irises flared brighter, spinning slowly like sparks caught in a draft. He stared at her mark for a long time. Then he sat back, Interesting, he said. Sable waited. Interesting? She repeated. That is all you have to say? Something had entered his expression that had not been there before. Not pity, not amusement. Something that looked almost like alarm. Your bond is not defective, Sable Voss, he said quietly. Your bond is not even weak. Her breath caught. Then what is it? She whispered. Severin stood. He moved around the desk with a deliberateness that told her he was choosing his next words carefully. Your bond, he said, is not with the Alpha King. The room tilted. The amber light swam. Sable gripped the arms of the chair. That is not possible, she breathed. The seer matched us. The ceremony was performed. He spoke the vows. Severin held her gaze, the embers in his irises spinning slowly. The seer was wrong, he said, or the seer lied. And before she could respond, he added, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, because the bond I see written across your skin is not connected to any wolf alive. Sable's wolf surged forward with a howl that shook her from the inside. Then who? She gasped. Who is my bond connected to? Severin did not answer, but his hand had gone to his own chest, pressing flat against his sternum, and the ember light in his eyes blazed so bright that for one impossible second, the entire hall glowed gold. Sable did not sleep that night. She lay on the narrow bed above the forge, staring at the ceiling while heat rose through the floorboards and hammer strikes below rang out like a second heartbeat. Her wolf paced inside her, restless, pressing against her ribs with an urgency that bordered on pain. Her bond was not with Cale. 3 years of marriage, silence, and loneliness, and not once had the mark responded. And the entire time, the bond had simply been pointing somewhere else. Somewhere that was not a wolf. She pressed her fingers to the mark and felt it pulse. The same faint flicker she had felt when the gates closed behind her. It was not glowing, but it was warm. Severin had not answered her question. He had looked at her with that burning gaze, his hand pressed to his own chest, the light in his irises blazing, and then he had closed his eyes. When he opened them, the light was gone. His expression was controlled, distant. Thessaly will escort you back to your quarters. We will speak again tomorrow. Tomorrow. As if she could possibly wait until tomorrow. As if she could sit in this room above a forge and not claw the walls apart with questions that had no answers. She reached for the stolen book. The leather was cracked and warm to the touch. The pages opened to a passage she had memorized. In the age before the Pax, before the wolves claimed dominion over the wild lands, the firstborn walked among all creatures and saw the threads that connected them. These threads were not bound by blood or species. They were bound by something older, a resonance of spirit that the firstborn called the Ember. The firstborn. The ancestors of the dragon-blooded. They had seen bonds between all living creatures, not just wolves. The wolf packs had inherited a diluted version of this ability, codified it into their marking ceremonies and seer traditions, and somewhere along the way, they had forgotten that bonds had ever existed outside their own kind. Or perhaps they had deliberately erased it. Sable closed the book. If the dragon-blooded could form bonds with wolves, it meant the seer who matched her to Cale had either been catastrophically wrong or had known the truth and buried it. It meant her mark was not broken. It had simply been reaching for someone the wolf world refused to acknowledge, and it meant Severin had seen something that had made the light in his eyes flare and his hand press flat against his own chest. She pulled on her boots and crept downstairs. The forge was dark. The streets of Thursal were different at night, the iridescent stone giving off a pale blue-green glow that turned the city into something dreamlike. She made it 4 streets before a voice stopped her. You are either very brave or very foolish. Thessaly leaned against a wall, arms crossed, her burgundy armor traded for a simple dark tunic. She looked like she had been waiting. I need to see the Lord, Sable said. At this hour, you would not survive the walk. The upper district patrols at night do not ask questions before they act. Then I will answer their questions. They are not human, or wolf, or anything else with the patience for conversation. Sable stared at her. Thessaly's mouth curved into something that was almost a smile. Go back to bed, Sable Voss. The Lord will see you tomorrow. He keeps his word. Do you know what he saw? Sable could not stop herself. When he looked at my mark? Thessaly's expression shifted. I know that the Lord has not looked at anyone the way he looked at you in 23 years, and I know that the last person he looked at like that is buried in the Eastern Garden. The words landed like stones in still water. Go back to bed, Thessaly repeated, quieter. Tomorrow will come whether you are rested for it or not. When dawn broke copper and warm, Thessaly arrived at the same hour. The citadel hummed its low, resonant song. Severin was standing this time, not behind his desk but in front of it, as if he had been waiting. There were shadows beneath his eyes that had not been visible the day before. He had not slept either. I need you to tell me the truth, Sable said before he could speak. No more interesting, no more tomorrow. I have spent years living inside a lie, and I will not survive another one. Something flickered in his amber eyes. Then stand. But what I have to tell you will take time, and your legs will tire before my words do. She sat. Severin moved to the window, his back to her. There is a condition among my people. It is rare, occurring perhaps once in a century. We call it the ember tether. It is what happens when a dragon-blooded individual forms a bond with someone outside our kind. Sable's breath stopped. The bond manifests differently than it does in wolves. There is no ceremony, no seer, no mark that appears on a specific birthday. Instead, the bond writes itself slowly, over years, reaching across distance until the two connected spirits come close enough for the thread to pull taut. He turned to face her. The last recorded ember tether in Thyrsil was 23 years ago. My father formed one with a woman from the northern wolf packs. She traveled here, just as you have. They were bonded for 6 years before she died. His voice did not waver, but Sable could see the cost of the words in the rigid line of his jaw. My mother, he said. The silence was heavy enough to bruise. You think that is what this is? She whispered. An ember tether. Between you and me. Severin's amber eyes locked onto hers. The gold filaments had gone still, like embers holding their breath. I do not think. I know. The thread is written across your skin in a language my people have read for thousands of years, and it does not point to Veilcross. It points here. He paused. It points to me. The mark on her collarbone pulsed, stronger now, and warmth spread through her chest and down her arms. She looked down. The gray smudge had not changed color, but it was glowing, faintly, like the first light of a coal that has just caught flame. Severin's hand was at his chest again, and his expression was one of a man standing at the edge of something he had sworn he would never approach again. This cannot happen, he said. The ember tether killed my mother. The bond between dragon blood and wolf is unstable. It consumes. You do not get to decide that for me, Sable said. I am the Lord of Thyrsil. And I am not one of your subjects. His jaw tightened. The ember light in his eyes flared and then dimmed, deliberately controlled. You will stay in the eastern quarter. Thessaly will see to your needs. We will not speak of this again until I have consulted the archives. You have just told me that my entire life has been built on a lie, and that my real bond is connected to a man whose mother died from the same condition, and your response is to consult the archives. Yes. That is the most infuriating thing anyone has ever said to me. Then you have lived a remarkably sheltered life, Severin replied. They stared at each other. The air between them was charged with something neither was willing to name. Fine, Sable said, standing. Consult your archives. But I will not pretend I did not see your hand go to your chest. Twice. Severin's composure cracked, just barely, something raw crossing his features before the mask slammed back into place. Thessaly will escort you out, he said. She was halfway across the hall when his voice stopped her. Sable. She turned. He was standing where she had left him, framed by the amber light falling through the glass dome, and for one unguarded second, he looked exactly like what he was. A man who had spent over 2 decades alone because the last time he let someone in, it destroyed him. Your mark, he said quietly. It is not defective. It never was. Her eyes burned. She nodded once and walked out before the tears could fall. She made it back to her room. She closed the door. She sat on the edge of the bed, and then a knock came, sharp and urgent. A man stood there. Not a guard, not a citizen of Thiersall. A wolf. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the deep blue livery of the Vilecross Royal Guard. Luna Sable Voss, he said, his voice tight. By order of Alpha King Cale Davrin, you are commanded to return to Valecross immediately. Sable's blood went cold. The Alpha King has declared your departure an act of treason, the messenger continued. He rides for Thiersall as we speak, with his army. Sable stared at the messenger and felt the past reach through the doorway to drag her backward. Treason, she repeated. The word tasted like rust. The messenger's jaw was set, his eyes fixed somewhere above her head, the way soldiers looked when they delivered orders they did not agree with but would not question. The Alpha King commands your immediate return. A refusal will be treated as confirmation of the charge. Behind her, the forge hammer struck iron. The sound rang through the floor, through her bones, through the thin silence between his words and her answer. How did you find me? Sable asked. Your scent was tracked to the Ashenmere crossing. From there is only one kingdom beyond the border. His gaze dropped to hers for the first time, and she saw something in it that surprised her. Not hostility, pity. My lady, I would urge you to come willingly. What the king intends for Thiersall if you do not, is not my responsibility, Sable said. The messenger blinked. I left a kingdom where I was unwanted, she continued, and her voice was steadier than she felt. I left a mate who mocked my bond with another woman in the dark. If the Alpha King wishes to march an army across a foreign border because his abandoned Luna bruised his pride, that is a war he chose. Not me. The messenger opened his mouth, closed it. He looked for a moment like a man who had expected to retrieve a frightened deer and found a wolf instead. Footsteps behind him. Thessaly appeared in the courtyard, flanked by 2 sentries whose iridescent blades were already drawn. Her expression was carved from stone. You are standing in the sovereign territory of Thiersall, Thessaly said to the messenger, delivering threats from a foreign king to a woman under our provisional protection. I would choose your next words with extraordinary care. The messenger straightened. I carry the word of Alpha King Cale Davrin. And I carry a blade, Thessaly replied. One of us should leave. I will let you guess which. The messenger's hand twitched toward his hip. The 2 sentries shifted their weight in unison, a movement so synchronized it looked rehearsed. The messenger was a trained soldier, but he was one wolf against 3 dragon-blooded warriors in their own city, and the mathematics of that were impossible to misread. He stepped back. The king rides within 3 days, he said to Sable, his voice tight. Whatever protection you think this place offers, it will not survive what is coming. He turned and walked through the courtyard. The sentries watched him until he disappeared around the corner. Thessaly's gaze swung to Sable. How long have you known your mate would pursue you? She asked. I hoped he would not. Hope is not a strategy. Thessaly sheathed her blade. The Lord needs to hear this. Now. The walk to the citadel was faster this time. Thessaly set a pace that was nearly a run, her boots striking the iridescent stone with sharp rhythmic cracks. Sable matched her stride for stride, her heart hammering with something that was not quite fear. It was closer to fury. All that time she had been invisible, insignificant. A Luna whose mark did not glow, and whose presence Cale barely acknowledged. And now that she had left, now that she had stopped being his convenient backdrop, suddenly she was important enough to start a war over. Not because he wanted her, because she had dared to leave. Severin was in the glass-domed hall. He was not alone. Two figures flanked him, a man with silver-threaded hair and the sharp bone structure of the dragon blooded, and a woman whose vertical pupils were ringed with a pale, almost white gold. They fell silent when Thessaly and Sable entered. "The Wolf King sends a messenger," Thessaly announced. "He rides for Thyrsil in 3 days, with an army." Severin's expression did not change. He looked at Sable. "You are not surprised," she said. "I am not," he confirmed. "An alpha does not lose his Luna and do nothing. Pride would not permit it, regardless of how he treated her. He did not lose me, he discarded me. There is a difference." Something shifted in Severin's amber eyes, the faintest flicker of heat that had nothing to do with the embersight. He looked away first. "Lord Cale," the silver-haired man said carefully, "granting asylum to the bonded mate of an Alpha King is a declaration. If we shelter her, we accept the consequences." "I am aware, Aldrich." "The consequences being war," Aldrich pressed, "with a wolf kingdom that outnumbers us 3-1. Sable's stomach dropped. She had known Veilcross was larger, but 3-1 was not a difference. It was a death sentence. "Then I will leave," Sable said. Every head in the room turned to her. "I will not be the reason people die. Send me back. Or send me somewhere else. Anywhere." Severin's gaze locked onto hers, and the intensity of it pinned her in place. "You will not leave," he said. "You cannot keep me here against my will. I am not keeping you here against your will. I am telling you that running will not save you, because you are not the reason your mate is coming." He paused, and his voice dropped. "He is coming because he knows. He felt the bond weaken when you crossed into Thyrsil. He does not understand what is happening, but he knows something has changed, and that terrifies him far more than your absence." Sable went still. "The bond with Cale, it is weakening?" "It was never real," Severin said. "What the seer created was an artificial tether, a forced connection that mimicked a true bond, but was never anchored in genuine resonance. The longer you stay here, the closer you are to the real thread, the faster the false one dissolves." The woman with the white gold eyes spoke for the first time. "And when a false bond dissolves completely, the alpha who relies on it will feel it break. It will feel, to him, like dying." The room was very quiet. "He is not coming for you out of love," Severin said. "He is coming because you are the only thing keeping him from experiencing what a severed bond feels like. And he will burn this kingdom to the ground before he lets that happen." Sable felt the floor tilt beneath her. She had thought she was escaping a loveless marriage. She had thought the worst was behind her. She had been wrong. "Then what do we do?" she asked. Severin looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Thessaly. "Prepare the Ember Wall," he said, "and send word to the Eastern Territories. If the Wolf King wants a war, he will find us ready." Thessaly saluted and left. Aldrich and the woman followed, their footsteps echoing through the vast hall until the doors closed, and Sable was alone with Severin for the 3rd time. The silence between them was different now. Heavier. Charged with the weight of what was coming. "I am sorry," Sable said quietly. "I never intended to bring danger to your kingdom." Severin studied her face. "You did not bring it. It was already here. It has been here since the moment a seer in Veilcross looked at your bond, saw where it truly pointed, and chose to lie about it. The implication settled over her like ice water. "You think the seer knew," she whispered. "You think the seer deliberately matched me to Kale to keep me away from you." Severin did not answer, but the ember light in his eyes burned steady and bright, and the look on his face was one of a man who had just confirmed something he had suspected since the moment she walked into his hall. "Go back to your quarters," he said. "Rest. You will need your strength." "For what?" Sable asked. Severin turned toward the window, his profile sharp against the amber light. "For what comes after the wall," he said, "because Cale Davern is not the only danger heading for Thiersall." Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, moving through a door she had not noticed, disappearing into the depths of the citadel and leaving her standing alone in the vast hall with her pulse roaring and the mark on her collarbone burning like a coal pressed against her skin. 3 days was not enough time to prepare for war. But Thiersall moved with a precision that made Sable understand why the Wolf Kingdoms had never dared cross the border before. The Ember Wall was not a wall. It was a barrier of superheated air the dragon-blooded could summon along the border, a shimmering curtain that turned the landscape into a wavering mirage. Thessaly explained it while Sable stood on the eastern rampart watching the preparations below. "It will not stop a determined army," Thessaly said. "But the heat will exhaust wolf soldiers before they reach the gates." Below, citizens moved through the streets with practiced calm, shuddering stalls, herding children toward the inner district. No panic, just the quiet efficiency of a people who had lived beside a hostile border for centuries. Sable felt useless. She was a healer from a backwater territory who had accidentally started a war by walking out of her own marriage. "Stop that," Thessaly said without looking at her. "I can hear you spiraling in the way you breathe. Come with me." Thessaly led her into the lower levels of the citadel, through corridors that grew warmer with each step. They stopped at a heavy iron door. "The archives. The Lord asked me to bring you here." The archives were a living record. Shelves carved into stone walls stretching upward into shadow. The air smelled of old paper and heated copper. Severin sat at a long table covered in open books. For a moment, before he looked up, Sable saw him unguarded. Then his composure slid back into place. "I have been searching the records," he said, "about the Ember Tether, about what happened to my mother." He turned a book toward her. "I was wrong about how she died." "Wrong how?" "The tether did not kill her. Someone from the wolf pack sabotaged it, poisoned it, introduced a corruption that turned the connection toxic." "Someone murdered your mother," Sable breathed, "and made it look like the bond was at fault." "For 23 years, the dragon-blooded have believed cross-species bonds are dangerous. That belief has kept us isolated." His eyes found hers. "And it was built on a lie. The Wolf Council has spent generations ensuring that bonds between our peoples do not form. Your false match to Kale was part of the same pattern." "Why?" she asked. "Because an Ember Tether creates something new, a third kind of power called the convergence. The last time one occurred, it ended the rule of every Alpha King on the continent. That is why they are afraid of us. That is why they will do anything to stop us." The mark flared with sudden heat. Severin crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hand hovering near her shoulder. "Let me see," he said, his voice rough. Sable pulled her collar aside. The mark was glowing for the first time in her life, a deep warm orange that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. "It is changing," Severin whispered. "The tether is strengthening." Their eyes met. He was close enough that she could feel the heat of him, could smell something uniquely him beneath the mineral scent of Thiersall. "Severin," she said, and his name in her mouth felt like the first true thing she had spoken in years. He stepped back with visible effort. "The convergence requires a free, uncoerced choice from both parties. If the bond is forced or rushed, it collapses, and a collapsed convergence kills both. So we cannot rush this. No, And we cannot ignore it either, because the longer the tether strengthens, the more visible it becomes to anyone with the ability to see it. Like the seers traveling with your mate's army. Kale was coming with seers who could see the tether forming, seers who had spent generations ensuring this never happened, and they would do anything to stop it. "How long do we have?" Sable asked. 2 days, Severin said. "Maybe less." Sable looked down at the glowing ember warmth on her skin, pulsing with a light she had waited her entire life to see. "Then we had better not waste them," she said. That night, Severin did something he had not done in 23 years. He invited someone into his private quarters. The invitation came through Thessaly, delivered with the commander's usual bluntness. "The Lord requests your presence in his chambers this evening. Bring the book." Sable stood in her room above the forge, clutching the stolen volume against her chest, and tried to convince herself that the trembling in her hands was adrenaline and not anticipation. She followed Thessaly through corridors she had not seen before, deeper into the citadel, past the public halls and council rooms, into a wing where the air grew warmer and the stone walls gave way to something darker, smoother, almost organic. The stone shimmered more intensely here, shifting between deep blue and molten copper as sconce light played across its surface. Thessaly stopped at a door made of the same dark material. "He does not do this," she said quietly. "He does not let people in here." "I know," Sable said, though she did not know. Not really. She could feel it through the tether, the significance of this gesture, the weight of what it cost him to open a door he had kept sealed for over 2 decades. "Do not hurt him," Thessaly said. It was not a threat. It was a plea. Sable met her eyes. "I would sooner hurt myself." Thessaly studied her for a long moment, then nodded and left. Sable pushed the door open. The room was not what she expected. She had imagined something grand, something befitting the lord of a kingdom. Instead, it was almost modest. A wide bed with dark coverings, a desk covered in papers, bookshelves lining every available wall, a fireplace where something burned that was not wood, a mineral compound that gave off a steady, ember-colored glow without smoke. And everywhere, on the desk, on the nightstand, tucked into corners and hung on walls, were small objects that did not belong to the sharp aesthetic of Thirsal. A wooden carving of a running wolf, a scarf made of rough-spun wool in forest green, a pressed flower behind glass, its petals long faded to the color of old parchment, his mother's things. Sable realized it with a pang that resonated through the tether and settled behind her ribs like a fist. Severin stood by the fireplace, his dark coat removed, wearing a simple linen shirt with the sleeves pushed to his elbows. Without the formality of his usual attire, he looked younger, more human, more vulnerable. "You kept her things," Sable said. His gaze flickered to the wooden wolf on the desk. "She carved that herself. The first week she arrived in Thirsal. She said it helped her feel less alone." Sable set the stolen book on the desk beside the carved wolf. The two objects sat side by side, the old leather and the worn wood, and something about the pairing felt significant in a way she could not articulate. "Tell me about her," she said. Severin was quiet for a long time. The ember glow from the fireplace cast shifting light across his face, and Sable watched the play of shadow and warmth, and waited. "Her name was Elith," he said finally. "She was from the Thornvale Pack, up in the Northern Territories. A healer, like you." The coincidence sent a shiver down Sable's spine. "She arrived at the border half-starved and completely certain she was going insane," Severin continued, and there was the ghost of a smile in his voice. "She told my father that she had been hearing a sound for months, a low hum that no one else could hear, and it was getting louder. She followed it south, past the wolf territories, past the Ashenmere, all the way to the gates. The hum was the tether," Sable said. The hum was the tether, Severin confirmed. My father recognized it immediately. He had been hearing it too. What was she like? Severin picked up the carved wolf and turned it in his hands. Stubborn, compassionate. She talked too much when she was nervous, which was always, and she had a habit of correcting people who were wrong regardless of their rank. He paused. She would have liked you. Sable felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. I would have liked her. The silence that followed was tender, fragile. The silence of two people standing on the edge of something enormous and choosing not to look away. Severin nodded toward the book on the desk. That text was written by a dragon-blooded scholar over 400 years ago. It should not exist in a wolf library. Someone placed it there deliberately. Someone who has been working against the council's efforts for a very long time, making sure that when the right person came along, they would know where to run. The idea that an unknown ally had been laying groundwork for decades to bring her here made the scope of this feel vertiginous, but questions about who could wait. What mattered was here, now, this room, this man. You should rest, Severin said. I do not sleep well, he admitted when she turned the suggestion back on him. I have not slept well since my mother died. Then do not sleep, Sable said. Just sit with me. He sat in the chair by the fireplace. She took the one opposite. They talked. Not about war or bonds or the army marching toward them. About small things. Gray mist. Her mother's herb garden. The time her youngest sister had turned a neighbor's goat bright blue with a botched dye mixture. Severin listened, asked questions, and slowly began to share things in return. His father's obsession with architecture, the way the citadel hummed differently depending on the season. The first time he had used the ember sight and seen the world lit up with connections he had no words for. Hours passed. The fire burned lower. Sable, Severin said, his voice quiet. The convergence requires a free, uncoerced choice from both parties. I need you to know that whatever you choose, I will not hold it against you. If you decide to leave Thirsal, I will let you go. The tether will weaken with distance. You would live. You would be free. And you? He did not answer. Severin, what happens to you? The same thing that happened to my father after my mother died. The dragon-blooded do not recover from a severed tether. It is like losing the ability to see color. Everything remains, but nothing is the same. How long did your father survive? 14 months. Sable's throat closed. 14 months. A slow, colorless death. I am telling you because you deserve the full truth, he added. No more lies. No more half-answers. Sable stood and crossed the space between them. She knelt in front of his chair, bringing their faces level. You are impossible, she said. Severin blinked. I beg your pardon? A noble, self-sacrificing, infuriating fool. I walked out of a kingdom for the chance to feel something real, and now you are sitting here telling me I can leave? I am giving you the choice, he said, his voice rough. Then here is my choice. She took his hand. The tether flared so brightly the room pulsed with golden light. I am staying. Because you are the first person who has ever looked at me and seen something that was not broken. His composure shattered. His free hand came up to her face, and his eyes were so full of everything he had held back for over 2 decades that she could barely breathe. I see you, he whispered, and nothing about you is broken. They stayed forehead to forehead, breathing together, the tether singing between them. Long enough for the fire to burn down to coals. Long enough for the loneliness of all those years to loosen its grip. Just enough to let something new take root. She did not kiss him. Not yet. What they were building was too important to rush, but when Sable finally stood to return to her quarters, Severin held her hand for a moment longer than necessary. Tomorrow, he said, Kale's army arrives tomorrow. She squeezed his fingers. Then we face it together. She walked back through the corridors of the citadel, her hand still warm where his had held it, the mark on her collarbone glowing steady and bright beneath her clothes. She was halfway to the eastern quarter when Thessaly intercepted her. The commander's face was pale, her usual composure fractured. "What is it?" Sable asked, fear spiking through the tether. "Scouts have returned from the border," Thessaly said. "Kale's army is not 3 days away. They cross the Ashenmere at midnight. They will reach the gates by dawn." Sable's blood turned to ice. "And Sable," Thessaly continued, her voice dropping, "they are not alone. There is a woman riding at the king's side, a seer. She carries something, an artifact. Our scouts could feel it from half a mile away." "Feel what?" Thessaly's vertical pupils contracted to thin slits. "Corruption," she said. "The same corruption that killed the Lord's mother." Sable ran. Not away. Toward. Back through the corridors. Back into the depths of the citadel where the air burned hot and the stone hummed beneath her feet. She did not knock on the door to Severin's chambers. She pushed it open. He was standing at the window, staring out at the dark horizon where a faint orange glow marked the ember wall. He turned when she entered, and the look on his face told her he already knew. "The corruption," she said, breathless. "The same corruption that killed your mother." Through the tether, Sable felt the earthquake beneath his calm, the raw terror of a man staring down the weapon that had already taken everything from him once. "Her name is Isara," Severin said quietly. "She is the head of the Wolf Council's seer order. She was there the night my mother died. I was 6 years old. I watched from behind a door as my mother's bond turned black and consumed her from the inside." His hands were shaking. Sable crossed the room and took them in hers. His fingers were furnace hot, almost burning, and she held on anyway. "That will not happen to us," she said. "You do not know that. I know that your mother faced Isara alone. We are not alone, and we are not too late." A horn sounded in the distance, low and long and mournful. On the horizon, beyond the ember wall, torchlight appeared. Hundreds of points of fire moving in formation through the dark. Kale's army. Bells rang from the citadel towers. The hum of the citadel deepened into something that vibrated in Sable's bones like a warning. "Stay here," Severin said. "No." "Sable, Isara's artifact is designed to corrupt ember tethers. If you are near me when she uses it, it will target the bond between us. And if I am not near you, you face her alone. Like your mother did." The words landed. She watched the argument die in his eyes. "Then stay close," he said, "and do not let go of me." They moved through the citadel hand in hand. The eastern gate was organized chaos. Thessaly stood on the rampart shouting orders. The ember wall blazed along the border, turning the approaching army into wavering silhouettes. Thousands of wolves in formation, marching toward Thursal with the momentum of a landslide. And at the front, riding a massive black warhorse, was Kale. Sable could feel the false bond between them, thin and fraying, pulling at her like a fishhook caught in scar tissue. A dull ache that demanded she return, submit, resume her place at his side. She gripped Severin's hand tighter. The tether flared warm in response, and the false bond's pull weakened like a candle flame in wind. Beside Kale rode a hooded woman on a pale horse that moved with unnatural stillness. Even from the rampart, Sable could feel the wrongness emanating from her. Cold where Thursal was warm. Dead where the tether was alive. Isara. "She is already working," Severin murmured, his eyes blazing gold with the ember sight. "She intends to release the corruption when they breach the wall." The army halted. A herald rode forward carrying a banner of truce. "Alpha King Kale Davrin demands the return of his Luna. Surrender the woman Sable Voss and the army withdraws. Refuse, and Thursal burns." Every eye on the rampart turned to Sable. She looked at Severin. Through the tether, she felt him offer her the choice one last time, wordlessly, one final chance to walk away. Sable released his hand. Severin's breath caught. She stepped forward to the edge of the rampart where the army and her husband could see her. The mark blazed ember bright, a beacon of orange light that made the soldiers below shift and murmur. "My name is Sable Voss," she called down, her voice clear and steady. "I am not the Luna of Veilcross. I never was. The bond that held me there was a lie, built by seers who feared what a true bond would create." She could see Cale's face now, rigid with fury. "I did not leave because I was weak. I left because I finally understood that I deserve a bond that sees me, a bond that does not laugh at my mark in the dark." Even from the rampart she could see Cale flinch. She turned back to Severin and took his hand. The tether ignited between them, visible now, a thread of ember-colored light connecting her collarbone to his chest, pulsing like a shared heartbeat. And then, Isara moved. The artifact she carried, a black stone sphere, erupted with dark light. The corruption poured outward like smoke, racing toward the glowing thread of the ember tether. "Hold on to me," Severin said. The corruption hit the tether like a wave hitting a seawall. Pain exploded through her chest, black and freezing, the opposite of everything the tether was. She gasped, her vision going white, and felt the bond shudder. But it did not break. Through the agony, she felt Severin's hand in hers, felt the heat of his blood, felt the tether burning brighter in response to the attack. The corruption tried to twist it, tried to poison it the way it had poisoned his mother's bond. Because his mother had faced it alone, and Sable was here. She thought about all those silent years, a mark that would not glow, being told she was broken, defective, not enough. And she thought about the moment Severin had looked at her mark and said, "It is not defective. It never was." The tether blazed, not ember-colored anymore, gold. Pure, blinding, ancient gold that erupted from the connection between them and shattered the corruption like glass. Isara screamed, and the artifact in her hands cracked down the middle and went dark. The convergence. Sable felt it happen, not like a lock clicking home, like waking up, like taking the first full breath after years of breathing through a cloth. The bond expanded, reaching outward, illuminating every thread within range in a cascade of golden light that swept across the battlefield. Wolves gasped, some fell to their knees, because for one shining moment, every bonded wolf in Cale's army could see their own bonds, truly see them, glowing and alive in a way the seer order had spent generations suppressing. And every false bond shattered. The silence that followed was absolute. Cale sat on his warhorse, his face ashen. Sable felt the moment the false bond between them dissolved completely, a snapping sensation, a release, and then nothing. No pull, no ache. Just emptiness where a lie had lived since the bonding. He looked up at her, and she did not see the Alpha King. She saw a man who had just realized that the foundation of his power had been built on something that was never real. Isara was gone, fled in the chaos. The army stood motionless, wolves staring at their own hands at their own mates, at bonds they were seeing clearly for the first time. Thessaly appeared beside Sable, her vertical pupils wide. "What did you do?" she whispered. Sable looked at Severin. He was looking back at her, his eyes full of tears, and he was smiling, and the gold light of the convergence still pulsed gently between them like a second heartbeat. "We woke up," Sable said. "The war ended without a single casualty." Cale withdrew his army before sunrise. He simply turned his horse and rode back across the Ashenmere, and his soldiers followed in silence. Whatever truth the convergence had shown him, he carried it back to Veilcross without a word. Sable did not watch him go. She stood in Severin's chambers, in the warm amber light, surrounded by his mother's things and the quiet hum of a citadel that seemed to sing differently now, brighter, as if the convergence had tuned it to a new frequency. Severin slept. For the first time in 23 years he slept deeply and peacefully, his hand still loosely wrapped around hers. The lines of tension that had carved themselves into his face since childhood had softened. He looked like a man who had finally set something down. Sable looked at the mark on her collarbone. It was no longer gray. It glowed a deep, steady ember gold. And when she pressed her fingers to it, she could feel Severin's heartbeat layered beneath her own. She was not broken. She had never been broken. She had simply been waiting for the right fire to catch. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you very soon for the next one.